This is Josh and Brian from the Just Kicking It podcast. Today we are chatting with Steve Sallis, former head of education and player welfare at Millwall Football Club. Steve will be presenting at the Next Gen Coaches 24-hour virtual conference hosted by Inspire Coach Education on July 29th, 2017. That's 24 presentations in 24 hours. I encourage you to go to InspireCoached.com for more details on how you can get access to Steve's presentation and the 23 other presentations from world leaders in coaching and coach education. Steve, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well. It's my pleasure to join you. You well?
Very well, very well. Great to talk to you. And I know you just recently left Millwall, but looking at the role that you had there, it was actually pretty unique. I mean, I haven't really come across that role before at a club. Maybe I'm just naive and ignorant to that role, but it seems pretty unique and almost crafted specifically for you. So can you maybe tell the people listening a little bit about that role and what it entailed and what areas you worked with in the club?
Yeah, great question. Firstly, I would like to emphasise it was a dream role for me, if I'm honest. I call myself on Twitter a failed football player, sort of say that slightly tongue-in-cheek. I was at an academy in England called my hometown, called Brighton and Hove Albion. So I played there till in my teenage years, and having got released and changed my career to go to university and did my sort of the next best thing really, which was to do my degree in physical education. So cut a long story short, I worked in South London's finest, and I say this very genuinely, failing schools. And I taught in schools in London for 15 years, had a career which spanned from head of year to head of department. I was a consultant for the old Labour government for behaviour, and I sort of had a very diverse range of education skills. I then was an assistant head teacher in 2 schools for 8 years. And talk about karma. An ex-pupil actually texted me about who was in his late 20s and said, "Have you seen the job at Millwall?" Now I live on Millwall's doorstep. I live in South London, have done for 20 years. And no disrespect, don't support Millwall. I'm a big Brighton fan. And it was head of education. And as my friend said at the time, it had my name written all over it. I sort of had lots of strategic experience, etc., in schools and universities, and was ready for my next step. I'd finished my masters in leadership and teaching and learning, and my next step was to be a head teacher. My brother's a head teacher, and the last thing I wanted to do was follow him anymore. And so really, I've come into Millwall. The role is imagine a senior leader in a school, and you pick it up and you put it straight into a football club. So I could bore you with the nuances there, but it's basically, in summary, looking at welfare, ensuring that the education pathways are great, making sure that lifestyle management is on point, and making sure we've got a diverse curriculum. When I mean diverse curriculum, I mean a football curriculum, I mean an education curriculum, I mean a mental conditioning curriculum and a psychology curriculum. And making sure that our players, as my title, i.e. holistic, we are implementing a holistic program. So basically looking at the 4 corners in summary and ensuring that our players are mentally well as well as physically well.
Well, as an experienced educator, what is maybe something that you have learned through your own education that you can give to football coaches in terms of what have you learned about how kids learn, about how athletes learn, that maybe you can give to the coaches listening or the coaches that you've worked with based on maybe some mistakes we might make, not being aware of the pedagogy and different things?
Yeah, such a good question. Really good question. It'd be really easy for me to label learning. I get quite frustrated actually. The more I live, the longer I realise I don't know what learning is and what it feels. And I don't mean that to sound blasé. Learning is so diverse and it's so individual to so many people. I have many influences. Howard Gardner being one. I recommend people to look up his work about multiple intelligences. He talks about people with kinesthetic intelligence and therefore their ability to sprint and turn and run. So if we look at the world's Olympic athletes and the diverse nature of sports that we have, and look at football as an example again. He looks at the kinesthetic intelligence. There's people that speak 4 languages but haven't got a GCSE to their name or a degree. There's people that are really emotionally intelligent. There's people that are great at art. There's people that are great at music. So what is learning? Honestly, I don't want. It'd be easy for me to fob the listeners with an answer. There is no answer.
Well, and I don't want this to come off bad or indifferent to what you do, but what is it that you would say to somebody if they asked you, what is it that you do to actually help the team win a game?
Great question. I think first and foremost, it depends on the mindset. Again, we talk about growth and fixed mindset and Carol Dweck stuff, but the best coaches I've worked for are the most holistic. And they are the most holistic because coaches themselves, we talk about player holistic development, but what about coach holistic development? And when you look at the history of leadership and how leaders evolve and how the most effective ones become effective and why they're effective, it's normally because they take skills from all different variables and collate those skills into a unique sort of process. So how do I answer the question? How do I help the team win? I help the team win because hopefully, and I say I hate that word, we hopefully make them feel more emotionally engaged in themselves, be more emotionally engaged in each other's goals, opinions, and agendas. How else will I make them win? Question and answering in terms of delivering effective teaching and learning techniques so players' self-awareness is greater about themselves. And when their self-awareness is greater, their understanding of their learning journey is clear, which means therefore we get accelerated learning because learning has more meat to the bone for the players. We get greater buy-in from the learning journey. So yet again, language like we, not I. How are we going to improve? How are we going to implement change on the pitch? And then really, so I'll give you an applied example. On a Monday for many years, I've basically done a horseshoe classroom. And that sounds really silly. I'm obsessed with a horseshoe instead of the traditional 10 seats, 10 seats, 10 seats. We've got, the little nuances and dynamics, and players just get to talk. They talk. I have more and more conversations about learning, about how they feel, and I can't emphasize that again. It's connecting about how you feel. If you don't connect the learning with the emotion, then you're not hiding to nothing.
You sort of gave a practical example there of one of the things that you applied within the classroom setting. What is something? How can you tangibly determine whether or not learning has happened? In other words, you implied there a couple of times that when the learning happens, when learning is seen. What is something that you're doing to measure that with? Great
question. Again, subjective or objective, but mainly feedback, which is qualitative. Star feedback saying that's great, and mainly player feedback. Player feedback going that's really helping because that helped Steve with me at the weekend because we had that conversation on Monday, and bearing in mind some of these conversations aren't easy. I'm talking about I'm lucky I work at an elite football club, so some of these conversations aren't easy. Sometimes these conversations make people feel vulnerable. Sometimes the emotional control can sometimes go within the group. But another side issue is educating people about emotional control and not what you say, how you say it. So the dynamics of that are huge. But mainly, in summary, player feedback. I wouldn't be able to be accurate in my judgment without players saying that works or that doesn't work.
Steve, how much in your role did you actually educate the coaches about educating? Was that something that was pretty predominant, or was it more player?
Great question. It's an interesting one. When you go into a new job, I think that the best leaders before they make any changes is just observe, and they listen and they watch, and through natural human dynamics, people just sort of become close, and mainly that was influencing people with behaviours. So we talk about intelligence, right? You've got an A license, you've got a pro license, you've got a degree, you've got this, you've got that. But intelligence is about behaviours. So I had a very challenging job influencing 25 staff about who I am and what I know. But it doesn't matter what I know. If it's not what I say, it's what they hear, right? So the majority, I have to say, the modern game in England, the modern game staff, more than they ever have been, are becoming teachers of life and football more than a coach. So I have to give credit to the Millwall staff. They are, without doubt, I've said this in many presentations before, they are the best group of people I've ever worked with in terms of having an open mind to wanting to make themselves better and therefore in turn the players better.
Well, it's funny that you just made the parallel between coaching and teaching, because you hear that quite often now. It's paid fairly frequent lip service, but
yeah,
I don't know if coaches truly understand what it means to be a teacher coach. So from your perspective, can you maybe provide an example of a coach, in a training session, how that message is delivered from a teacher standpoint, more so than a more direct coach-oriented standpoint?
I don't want to label anyone here because that would be derogatory. There's some great teachers and there's some great coaches and there's some rubbish teachers and there's some rubbish coaches that are in this world, all with equivocal qualifications, right? So yeah, again, I've said this before. Intelligence is about behaviours. End of story. So I was really surprised when I joined Millwall, and I see this with all academies. It's not about Millwall. Forget Millwall. It's about everyone. It's about all the clubs that are all trying their hardest to do their best. I was really surprised that when I go back 10 years, comparing to now, the quality of teaching and learning that is going on at football clubs is far greater than there's ever been. You only got to look at the youth modules, the Advanced Youth Award, and all the youth mods, all the teaching and learning, all the pedagogy, all of the diverse nature of what teaching and learning is. It is miles ahead. So I can't praise the industry enough for we're always on an accelerated learning curve now, because as I said, first question you said to me, what is learning? I don't know. I know what it isn't, probably. I know what it isn't, but I definitely don't know what it is.
What is one of the leading questions you get from a player or a coach when they start to see that there's some type of problem going on? Like, do you have something that you hear quite often is redundant within your profession, with something that they're thinking that is incorrect and that you have to go in and actually improve it?
Brilliant question again. I was in a fortunate position. I'll sidetrack slightly. I worked in failing schools, the toughest schools, high gang culture, high crime, and I've dealt with kids in the most deprived areas in Britain, and they have ended up going to Oxford and Cambridge. So I mean, coming in Stabvest in year 7, and then in 5 years, 7 years later, going to university. So I know what human growth. I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky. I'm lucky because I know what human growth is capable of. I know what people's change and behaviours are capable of. So my link to that is high trust environments. So answering that question, the schools that I worked in were high trust environments, meaning the staff were so synchronised and so on board and so engaged in each other's journey that therefore school improvement, which is in the most challenging place you ever know, actually can be achieved. Linking that therefore to high trust environments in the football club, basically we are looking at all of the nuances of how we get high trust. That takes time, linking again to my strategy moving into Millwall. It's not about me coming into a new job and nailing people with my knowledge. Unless you get trust, you don't get anything. So in summary, trust amongst staff, and no disrespect to football, it's known as an industry which is lacking trust in certain levels. But I think really secure people that haven't a hidden agenda, people that have an agenda to support young people, I think therefore we're able to implement a program where players are feeling emotionally safe to say, I feel vulnerable because, and then basically in summary, we look at solutions around the problems, and then we try and look at how we implement that.
Well, I've got to ask, have you ever dealt with the situation where the head coach believes that the players trust him, but you've seen it maybe from another side, that it's more of a superficial type trust, right? Like, I just want to get on the field. I just want to be in the pocket of the head coach, but I don't really like his methods. Have you ever come across these types of things?
And I have in teaching as well. But the irony is, we talk about holistic development. So let's go back to the topic: holistic development of players. But what about the holistic development of staff, right? So we talk about player self-awareness. Your question, I hope, is linked to staff self-awareness, because if staff aren't aware of themselves, of their language, of their listening skills, of their ability to genuinely, with behaviours again, empathise, with their ability to work in a team environment, with their ability to lead through behaviours again, not through status, with all of these nuances of what elite development is. Without stating the obvious, some coaches are better than others. Some coaches are autocratic, some coaches are democratic, some coaches are in the middle. And how they marry that yet again and differentiate for each age group, you know, no disrespect, I don't treat the under 12s like I treat the under 18s. So you know, whether that's obvious to some coaches, I don't know, but you have to be a chameleon as an educator. When I mean educator, I mean coach. You have to be a chameleon. You have to be completely and utterly adaptable and open to criticism. And when you've got high trust environments, I'll give you an example of a member of staff. I've disagreed. There's one member of staff at my current place of work. I've disagreed with him more than any other person on the whole planet, and I'm close with him intellectually and emotionally than anyone else on the whole planet as well. So work that one out.
Well, Steve, I was going to ask you, so you mentioned if you're first starting out with an organization, the first thing you'll do is observe. So you'll go through some sort of observation period to see what the natural behaviors are before you maybe jump in and try to change anything. But I wanted to see maybe what are the more common mistakes you see in organizations, teams, etc., schools, that are common across the board. Like, you go in, you observe, and you're like, there it is again. It's the same mistake. And then what might that be, and how might you maybe change that?
You know, you guys are asking some brilliant questions tonight. You know that. This is
afternoon over here, actually.
This is a challenge. I had a head teacher, worked under 11 head teachers. 8 of them were rubbish, 3 of them were exceptional. All right, and the exceptional ones, wow, like, they're just another level. And one of them told me once, he said, Steve, he said, you only need protocols for poor members of staff. He said, good members of staff just make things happen anyway. And I was sort of trying to absorb what he said at the time, and the more you evolve in education and sort of training and coaching, you understand that he's right. So what do I see? You know, you see unconsciously incompetent people that are unaware of their poor skills. You see very humble people that actually don't realize how good they are. You see people that are poorly led and have so much potential and are not harnessed, nurtured and cared for with nuggets of mentoring and knowledge and mentoring. And then you see the eye specialists, you know, and you say, what's an eye specialist? And they're the ones that they said, I did this and I did that and I did this, you know. So like, you see all of it. And the best people are, going back to emotions, are the kindest, the most caring, the most engaged in you. Forget the coach, you the person, the people that want to go on a journey, the people that ask more questions and answers. That's common in any industry, surely.
Well, and maybe, you know, we can spend the rest of our time today talking about this topic. Hopefully Brian doesn't have a different question, but it seemed like the common theme in what you just said and all that is self-awareness. And that seems to be the first step. You mentioned unconsciously incompetent. And I think a lot of times to improve ourselves as people, coaches, professionals, it's making that jump from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent and starting to recognize these faults that we have. So maybe you can start off just describing what self-awareness is and maybe its importance in learning and education.
Tough one. It's just without stating the obvious. It's about your environment again. Like I'm lucky. I've got a big brother. Brother's a principal. My brother's on the ball. If I'm not behaving how he like, he'll tell me and tell how he is. So I'm fortunate. You know, I'm from a family. You know, it's your environment. My family are unbelievable people. My friends, all senior leaders in schools. They've all done the walking. They've all walked the walk. You know, Wayne Bennett's written this book called "Don't Die with the Music in You." It's about rugby, but it's a powerful book. It's an easy read. And so self-awareness comes from being around people, from experiences, from failures, hours and hours of failures. You know, worked 15 years in schools, and most of those 15 years were failures. They weren't successes. They were difficult. They were tough. They were challenging. And you know, you got to innovate. You got to be creative. You just got to have. You know, we talk about 10,000 hours, right? You know, the Gladwell stuff. But it's as we all know in the industry, it's 10,000 experiences. You just need loads and loads of experiences, interactions. No, and I say this quite confidently. It's about how you act and how you interact. And if you act and you interact in ways where people grow towards you, then you're around high trust environments, and high trust environments makes a great self-awareness because people can be honest with you rather than tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, but I've got to ask, how do you talk down someone on the ledge, off the ledge, who is unconsciously incompetent? They just don't know they don't know. How do you break that to somebody in a very delicate manner? Because it really punches the ego, doesn't it? If I told you that, I mean, that would be a straight shot to the chin. but you know, how do you go about educating yourself, getting someone to actually really be self-aware that they are unconsciously incompetent, and then moving them into that next stage?
You want the honest answer? I don't think that's my job. I don't think that's my job. I genuinely don't. Like, I'm not a martyr of life. I'm just trying to get on my own little journey and help young people, and you know, and my colleagues. So if those people are like that, what's my job to tell them? If you know, if they haven't worked it out themselves, then they will soon find out. You know, yeah. Again, it's not even a battle you can't win. It's just something that, you know, without being derogatory to them, it's their loss, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was looking at it from the sense of maybe it's someone you know and you care deeply for, and you just understand that they don't understand, they don't know, correct? And as an educator yourself, someone that's really deep into understanding this whole theory of how people learn and how we should be speaking to each other in ways that we can get them to understand learning, I thought maybe you might have a practical way or a pragmatic.
Yeah, okay. Now you put it like that, now it sounds really silly. Now you put it like that, it makes much more clarity. Someone that I care about, right? Is that what you meant?
Yes, absolutely. You know, it could be a coach.
Yeah, so people, yeah, okay. So it goes back to high trust again. I sound like a flipping parrot here, but it goes back to high trust again. So if you've got high trust and it's someone that you care about, and you can see that, like you say, they're on the wall and they don't know what the journey is. Most people know me that have worked with me would say I would probably do the usual and question them. Why do you think like that? What is your rationale? Where is your evidence stream? You know, what impact do you think you can have with that decision? You know.
And as the educator, you have a clear reference, though, that you're dealing with, right? Like, you already have something that's clear that you're questioning him on to get him to that goal, whatever it may be.
I think, yeah, again, when you become skilled, you work backwards more than forwards. So, you know, sometimes it's in leadership, it's not about me overpowering somebody to get the short-term win.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll give you an example where I'm on a win-win. I've got a member of staff that says, I think we should do it like this, and I don't agree with them whatsoever. Okay, I don't agree. I don't want to suppress that feeling. I don't want to overwhelm it. I don't want to do anything like that. It's an easy answer. They go and do what they want to do. If it's successful, we both win. Okay? If their idea is successful, we both win. If their idea is wrong, not that it's about me or them, but I win, right? Because they've gone on their journey. they've decided it. I've given them the ownership to say that's what you're going to do, and it's turned out, you know, flawed. So therefore, I trust it's not always about quick short-term wins. It's about long-term gain. It's always about long-term gain, and that goes again to youth development, because we all know that some coaches, it's about them and not about the kids, and we need to come away from that and start thinking about, okay, how is my behaviour and my decision making going to impact on young people?
That was really, I like the way you put that, because that in itself indirectly was self-awareness, right? That individual that you said, we have to be self-aware that we know it's not about us, because I've been caught in that situation where I'm in there just trying to prove my point that I want to win. And if I'm more self-aware, I'm coming at it more of what you just said.
Yeah, I see your point.
So, Steve, one of the last questions before we talk about your presentation is, unfortunately, not everybody is in an environment where it is oriented towards self-awareness, because I think it's culturally, you're seeing people are they fear having difficult conversations. So they'd rather resort to criticizing someone behind their back and keep letting them fail, instead of confronting them, like you said, and maybe asking a general question of, hey, why did you do that today? And following that up. So we tend to avoid those things, and we don't get called out ourselves. For example, me, maybe no one says anything to me that I'm unconsciously incompetent, and I'll never have this moment of self-awareness. So for people in those situations, is there a way to create our own version, our own environment, an individual environment of self-awareness, where we can continually check our own methods to see if they're improving or regressing?
I mean, there's a traditional top business type models, right? So companies I've worked in, schools, have done 360 feedback, you know, more developmental stuff. Do you know about the Johari window?
Mm.
So the Johari window, I advise everyone to look that up. I did that with the under-18 squad last week. Huge, basic sort of big self-awareness tasks where kids get to talk about themselves, other people get to describe words about them. So on an operational level and applied level, that's what we need to look at. But yeah, again, it's interesting, you know, like it's a bit like the Ringelmann effect and the social loafing, isn't it? You know, like you've got loads of people all pulling their weight, and then the person that's not just gets ostracised. And I think that the football industry is quite good now, because we're in a loads of places, but there's loads of expertise, sports scientists, nutritionists, dietitians, psychologists, education people. We've just got lots of people with lots of knowledge. So actually those people, if they've got the emotional intelligence to connect that, then you're on a win-win. And that's why the English games is going to be in a good place in 5 to 10 years, because with the education of the people that are dealing with young people, there's just better people involved. You know, not that there wasn't 20 years ago. There's great coaches are timeless, great teachers are timeless. But now, you know, my sports science knowledge, everyone knows this, is absolutely appalling. You know, so I need those people. You know, I need those people. We all need those people. We all need the experts in our own individual fields.
So the answer is basically, and this has been said in a lot of different ways, but we should look for environments to put ourselves in, or hire people around us that, like you said, have expertise and are not afraid to challenge and push the boundaries. The
most healthy, high performance teams have people that are not going to be anarchic and upset the apple cart and cause chaos. But you're going to have people that say to me, Steve, I do not agree. Happy days. If that's happening, if people say I do not agree, literally, I'll employ them tomorrow.
That's good. Well, Steve, your presentation for the 24-hour virtual conference is titled The Real Social Science Behind Holistic Development. So could you give the listeners or the people watching a little bit of a synopsis of what we can expect?
Yeah, I'm just going to look at so I'm not looking away from, just going to look at my laptop here because I've got it here. Just wanted to be clear on it. Really, the outcome one is defining what holistic development is. You couldn't make it up. You know, like, again, languages can be quite dangerous and quite powerful at the same time. So unless people know what holistic means, then they probably not know what holistic development in sport or football means. So that's really the outcome there. And then learning outcome 2 was about self-awareness. So we're looking at, I give example, meta learning, the stuff that I've implemented. So I've got school pedagogy and I've picked up and put it into the football club. bit of a gamble, but it seems to have paid off. So I'm going to discuss there about learning to learn. So instead of talking about football, we're going to talk about learning. And how I describe, and I love my industry, it's an industry I'll be in for the rest of my life, but the analogy I use for football is loads of people know loads about football, but they don't know loads about learning. They don't know loads about psychology. They don't know loads about sports science. So we need all of these experts to incorporate that and how we add value there. And then my final outcome is about the moral and ethical side. So really, what does it look like and how does it feel, and strategic and operational guidelines towards a proper holistic program, looking at school pathways, looking at dual pathways, how we can make young people successful in school and in performance, and basically, in a nutshell, raising the bar. I love football, but if I was to batter football with one comment, the aspiration of schools is just bigger than a football club. And that isn't me being topping it. It just is. It just the aspiration is greater. So I'm going to talk to people and on my presentation about the Pygmalion effect. So if people want to look that up beforehand, that'd be advisable. But I swear by the Pygmalion effect. And it's I'm not going to tell you what it is. It'd be for people to research.
Well, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. 30 minutes has already flown by, and you've dropped a lot of nuggets already.
Thank
just
you.
a conversation that I know Josh has written some notes down, and we got preseason coming up, so a lot of this stuff is very useful when we get our players in a team room. So love the horseshoe setting, even the round tables to get more player discussions. Phenomenal ideas. So I know we look forward to seeing your presentation on the conference with InspireCoached. And we wish you well, and thank you again for chatting with us.
Oh, great questions, gentlemen. Genuinely good questions. You challenged me tonight. You challenged me.